Hello, it's Bactrian, and today we're going to be talking about the Canadian election, and more specifically, we're going to be talking about Mark Carney and how far can Mark Carney rise? How far can the Liberals' fortunes continue to ascend? Because, I mean, we're about a week in now. I mean, we've got 20, well, now at this point, basically 27 days left. I'm filming this at the end of April 1st. And the campaign so far has gone about as well for the Liberals as they could have hoped. Carney has continued to hold on to his lead, and in fact, in the consensus of polls over the last couple days, has grown it. His lead now sits at about 6-7, nearing into 8 points in the average, in the aggregate, which is quite the lead. The Liberals are sitting at around 45% in the average of polls, 44-45%. In the latest 338 update, the Liberals have a 99% chance of winning the most seats, a 88% chance of a majority. They're projected to win 191 seats. 191. A comfortable majority, and of course a world away from what they were projected to win just at the beginning of this year. They've really made quite a stunning comeback, and seemingly it's perhaps not even over. And it's not just 338 Canada. I mean, Eric Grenier's model that's hosted on CBC finds that, the Liberals are sitting at an average of 203 seats. So a very comfortable majority. We're at 43% and up 1.2% when they last updated it. It's since yesterday, right? And this is primarily coming from other parties and not the Conservatives. But, these numbers paint quite the picture. I mean, the Liberals have seemingly improved across the board at the expense of all other parties, with the exception of the Conservatives, whose support has remained. They've hung in there, basically. So how far can he keep this thing going, right? I mean, he's already sitting around 45%. That is about the peak where the Conservatives were in their absolute peak in January. Can he rise any further? Is this about as good as it gets? And, is there only downside from here? Well, I think it's a complicated question, right? But there are reasons for optimism from the Liberal perspective, and I suppose severe pessimism from the Conservative perspective. But I wouldn't be so sure. Let's get into that. So, I mean, I've seen people make a lot of hay out of the Ecos polls. I mean, in reality, this latest Ecos poll is actually worse for the Liberals than the last two. The last one had them at 15%. This one has them at 12%. So, I mean, if anything, oh my God, it's showing a Liberal decline. But these numbers are still aberrant. They're out of the norm. Although they are beginning to really converge with the rest of the numbers, right? So perhaps we can take them a bit more seriously than when they were at 15 and the rest of the polls were at 4. But they're not actually that detailed. What is much more of interest to me was the most recent poll from Angus Reid, because they have all sorts of detailed subtabs. And I mean, it shows, so the top line numbers, show Liberals 46% holding where they were last week. Demographic profiles, it shouldn't come as much of a surprise. This was the case before the candidate switch and all of this, right? The Liberals, they're getting more votes from women, particularly older women, and older people in general. I mean, older men is their best demographic for age groups with men. And meanwhile, the Conservative base is primarily, their strongest base is middle-aged men. And middle-aged people in general. They do best with middle-aged women as well. The Conservatives have largely given back a lot of their gains they had seen among younger voters. And I mean, you can see even here in the numbers, like the Liberals were at this time last year so far from how they were doing at their worst. In March of 2024, they were at 19% with young men, so 18 to 34. And 18% with young women, 18 to 34. They are now at 45% with young men and 50% with young women. So a incredible surge, right? Over the course of a year. And the conservative numbers have, while they have gone up, have not gone up by that much, right? They've more just kind of held. They've gone up from March of last year. Since January, of course, they had a bit of a decline. But going further from that, we see that the oh my God, there's so many here. The commitment. When it comes to the commitment, this is where things look kind of worrying for the Conservatives potentially, which is that when they did this poll last week, the Liberals, they found, had about 30% of their base was committed to voting for the Liberals, something like that. 30-40%, like high 30s, 40%. Now they're finding that number is continuing to go up. So, and keep in mind that they're finding that the Liberal support has grown slightly. So Carney's base is not only growing his base of support, but is consolidating, right? It's getting more solid. Meanwhile, the NDP, which has continued to hemorrhage voters, has barely improved at all. The NDP was at 30% 2 weeks ago in terms of voter commitment and are at 33% now, or 34% now. Sorry, the graph's a little hard to read. So this means that there's plenty of room, considering that the primary area where the Liberals have gained is at the expense of the NDP. There's tons of room for them to continue to grab support from the NDP. In fact, as you can even see, despite the fact that the NDP is at 7% in this poll, there's still 11% of NDP voters, and then I guess a smaller sliver who are not very committed at all, but about 15% who aren't really committed to the choice and who could easily switch according to their own self-reporting, right? I mean, that's a disaster for the NDP. I mean, if they continue to hemorrhage votes, it looks like their absolute base, their absolute lowest their support can get is 2%. I mean, that's what this would suggest, at least, if only 34% are very committed. And that, I mean, if the Liberals were to gain an additional 4 or 5 points in these polls, again, not saying this will happen at all, but this polling would suggest it is at least possible to imagine that happening, an additional gain of 4 because presumably 90% of the support would go to the Liberals, then they'd be approaching getting a majority of the popular vote. And that's before we even talk about the fact that the Bloc Québécois has similar numbers. And in fact, unlike the NDP numbers, the Bloc's numbers have gotten worse over time. The Bloc was sitting at about 50% were saying that they were committed last week. I mean, it seems like this was maybe a bit of a weird response because 39% the week before, but whatever. It was at around mid-40s in the average the last few times they did this poll. Now it's at 33. The lowest of the three parties say they're very committed to voting for the Bloc. And what that means is that you could potentially see and of course this would only be in Quebec, but even so, it would help them run up the numbers even more there. You could even see more of the vote go from 2 different sources to the Liberals. I mean, because of course the Bloc, you got to imagine, in the NDP's case, it would be about 9 and 10 of those votes would go to the Liberals. In the Bloc's case, I would imagine something more like 60-70%. There are there are areas where the Conservatives do well in Quebec. They do a lot better in Quebec City, for example, than in Montreal and in some rural areas. But this would overwhelmingly redound to the Liberals' benefit. And it suggests that, as hard as it may be to believe, and I frankly have a very hard time believing that this really is the case, but it really does seem like this Liberal lead could keep growing. And I don't find it inconceivable to imagine a scenario where by the end of this election campaign, again, if things keep going as they're going, you could see the Liberals not only maintain this, but perhaps actually approach the high 40s and maybe even break 50%. It is shocking to say that, and I wouldn't put money on that outcome. I really wouldn't. I kind of think the polls will narrow a little bit towards the end, although I still am pretty comfortable saying that the Liberals are very well set up in this thing. It's a lot. It's pretty crazy, you know. And I mean, and if they were to win that would be the first time anyone has won the majority of the popular vote since the 80s, right? 1984 was the last time that happened under Mulroney. It would be a stunning turn of events. Now, totally could also not happen, to be clear. Totally could go the other way. I mean, it's hard to imagine a scenario where the Conservatives are able to completely turn it around and win. Nothing's impossible. I mean, no one was talking about this a couple months ago, and look what happened. So, who knows? But what's more realistic is that, the Carney somehow just blows his lead. And let's get into that a little bit. I think there is some potential downside, obviously, in the short term. A couple examples of potential turbulence is the whole recent Paul Chiang fiasco, right? Where he was the guy running in Markham Unionville for the Liberals. He had this insane gaffe in sort of like local, in like Chinese language media, where he said that his opponent had like a bounty on him. China, I think something related to Hong Kong, and he said that you could bring him in to the Chinese consulate and claim the bounty, right? Which is obviously a pretty insane thing for a candidate to say about his opponent. And Carney kind of handled it poorly. I mean, this is an obvious thing. It's not like we're past the deadline to get rid of candidates. He could have just tossed the guy with little consequence, but he kind of waffled on it, and and then eventually he resigned. I imagine he probably was told hey, we can't really, this is kind of untenable, right? This isn't a huge deal, to be clear. I mean, it's getting a fair bit of play right now, but these sorts of things happen. I mean, as an example, on the same day, the Conservatives have had to oust two candidates. The first one over remark I won't repeat on here out of fear of some kind of YouTube thing, just because but you can look it up. And then the other one, I don't actually know why. I mean, I think you're saying because of some stuff he posted on X or something. I don't know. God, it feels weird to call it X, Twitter or whatever. But yeah, they've had issues. They've also had comparative issues. So it's not really like the Liberals are showing signs of a majorly weak campaign. It's sort of just Carney is perhaps, it's his first time running a kind of national campaign, isn't as decisive as he maybe is needed to be, but I mean, seemingly people don't care, right? I think the primary thing that this election has remained about is the tariff stuff. And given that, as of this recording, tomorrow is the Trump Liberation Day, and who knows what he's going to do in terms of tariffs there. And also given that seemingly Carney has done pretty well at crisis management thus far. I mean, he had his call, and afterwards, it even says here, Trump also appeared to be more respectful of Carney, considering Trump called Carney by his official title and not governor, as he did for predecessor Justin Trudeau. This remains the main issue of the race. Barring a major de-escalation in trade tensions, I don't see that changing as the main story. And that is just not terrain Poilievre does well in. It's just not. It's not the kind of campaign he went into this thinking it was going to be. And he has still not been able to seize on that issue. And I kind of doubt he ever really will be able to. I think the best case scenario for him is just that things change somehow. I mean, we got a month. It is possible, I guess. It's just quite hard to see. So yeah, I mean, how much room on the upside is there for Carney? How much further can Carney soar? I would say, as hard as it is to kind of believe, just because it's so out of what seemed possible just a few months ago, the Liberals are doing it. I mean, they really could continue to run up the score and get a result that would be truly without comparison in the 21st century for Canadian electoral politics. It would kind of, if this result even were to happen today, that would kind of, it would be more significant than 2015, of course, when Trudeau won a majority in the massive comeback for the Liberals. But I mean, if they were to run it up further, my God, it would be quite something to behold, regardless of what one feels about any of the actors involved. Just the spectacle of it would really be something. So we'll see if it happens, if this really is a wave election. But yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. That's all I got to really say about that. And yeah, I was factoring. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe. I did get some comments owning me in the previous videos, and fair enough, about the volume on the mic. I have tinkered things a bit, so just let me know if it's maybe too loud, not loud enough, whatever, if you care to. I mean, whatever. And yeah, like, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. Hope you have a good day. Bye.